Good day. This is Jerry Mayberry with Echosens North America. In this instructional video, we'll cover how to conduct FibroScan file management. Everything that I state in this video will apply only to the FibroScan 502 Touch and the FibroScan 530 Compact. If you're using any other model FibroScan device, please use different instructions. These instructions also should be applied only to studies which cover a signed patient consent enrolling the subject into the study. Let's get started. During this presentation, I'm going to talk about what is a FibroScan file, what is it that you need to do with these files from a data management standpoint, and will include specific procedures for what you do when you initiate an examination and also what you do in a post-examination mode. In all screens, what you will see is a PowerPoint slide on the left, and on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is the screen of an actual FibroScan device. I will move back and forth between the PowerPoint slide and the FibroScan itself to exemplify each thing that I explain. Let's start out by talking about FibroScan files. When you acquire a FibroScan study, you're creating a file that's called FIBX or FibX, if you will. An FIBX file is a FibroScan examination file. Now, this is a proprietary file format that's created by a FibroScan device and can only be reviewed with another FibroScan device or FibroScan reading software. These files contain all the information of a study so that a FibroScan file can be reopened and examined for quality control indicators on any other FibroScan. Merely reviewing a study's report, which is a PDF file, does not provide enough information to do these quality control steps. Each FIBX or FibX file will be everything that's related to acquiring one study on a specific patient, and it will include all the measurements that were acquired. A study file will be about 6 to 10 megabytes, and it will be identified by a very long file name, such as you see at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide, followed by .fibx. This file name, just so that you understand, the first portion of it is the serial number of the device on which that study was acquired. The second portion of the file name is the date that study was acquired in year, month, and day. And finally, the last portion in a file name is the time that the study was acquired in hours, minutes, and seconds. Now that we understand what an FIBX or FibX file is, let's talk a little bit about what we do in the pre-examination phase as well as the post. In this slide, I'm talking about pre-examination procedures. What are the things that you have to do when you initiate a new study to acquire a patient file? First of all, of course, you'll have to have your FibroScan. You'll also need a USB stick or an external hard drive. We'll be using that in a future step. And you're also going to need a special software program that has been provided to you by Echosens called FibX Anonymizer. We'll talk about that later. Now let's talk about when you acquire a new study, how do you fill out the data fields to be consistent with the study that you're doing? First of all, you're only going to complete 2 fields within the patient demographic screen, which I'm showing on the current PowerPoint slide. For the last name field, you're going to put in the subject ID, which of course is determined by the study that you're performing. The only other field you will complete is the code field, and the code field will have the ID number of the drug study that you're doing. Let's take a look at what this would look like if we were actually performing these functions on a FibroScan. So I'm going to move to the right side of the screen to the FibroScan area. And the first thing I would do if I were acquiring a new study is I would click the icon in the lower right to initiate a new study. You will notice as soon as I do that, the patient demographic field opens up. And here you can see the last name field into which I would put the subject ID, and you can see the code field with the study ID. These are the only two fields that you would complete. If you were doing a second or third study on a specific subject that had been studied previously with this FibroScan, as soon as you put in the last name and the code data, if that patient has been studied before, you will see their name on the right-hand side. You would merely confirm that that is indeed the same subject. You would highlight it, and then you would hit the acquire button to initiate a second or third or fourth study on that same subject. Now we will talk about the post-examination steps, the file management steps that you would take to export the data from your FibroScan to a backup source that can be shared with the EchoSyn's website. Of course, anytime that you want to do anything with the FibroScan, you would first boot it up, and you've already been trained on that procedure to include your passcode. Once the FibroScan is on, booted up, you would put your USB stick or USB external hard drive into the USB port on the front of the FibroScan, which in this PowerPoint slide is marked as slots F. There are, of course, two ports there on the front of the FibroScan, and you would merely use either one of them. If you're using a 530 compact, the USB ports would be in the back. And once again, it doesn't matter which USB port you use. Now that we have the USB stick inserted in our FibroScan, we need to select the files that we want to export. To do this, we would have to enter the archives mode of the FibroScan. Now, the archives mode would be accessed from the bottom of the FibroScan screen, and it would be marked with an icon that would either have an A in it, as you see as 1A in this PowerPoint slide, or it might be a symbol that looks like an old floppy disk, in which case it would look like example 1B. Let's move over to the FibroScan and actually walk through these steps using a FibroScan device. I want you to notice the software that I'm using on this FibroScan uses the floppy disk icon to enter the archives mode. I'm going to click on that archives icon, and now what you see is you see all the patients that are on this FibroScan. Now, what we would want to do before we do data export is we would want to use our magnify glass tool to select a specific series of studies that we want to keep together in a group for exporting. To select specific studies, you would go to the lower right-hand corner of this screen and you would click the magnify glass icon. Now you will see fields here which you can use as search criteria. Now in the case of your study, remember you've only completed two fields, the last name, which is the subject ID number, and the code field, which is the study ID number. So the technique you would use at this step is you would go to the code field and you would put in the code for the study that you want to do the exporting for. Now in this case, on this FibroScan, I don't have a code field, so I'm going to use the last name field, and I'm just going to type in search criteria ERB because I know I have some patients that have that search criteria in their last name. Now I'm going to click the magnify glass again to activate the search based on that criteria. Now you will notice that the FibroScan has found all the patients or subjects, if you will, that meet that search criteria, and you can see them all here. So what this means is now that I've selected that group of studies that I want to back up and use for data export, my next step would be to generate two kinds of files. I'm going to generate FIBX files for each of these studies and put them on the USB stick. And I'm also going to create a summary Excel file that would summarize the study data from all of the FibX files that you see highlighted here. Let's use the actual FibroScan to generate all the FibX files and place them on the USB stick that's inserted in a FibroScan. To do this, I will merely go to the F button at the bottom of the screen. Think of F as standing for FIBX file. So I will click that button, and the FibroScan now is asking me, do you want to export the FibX files of the last exam or all the exams that are visible on the screen? I'm going to click all exams. Now, the next question it's going to ask me is, should this data be nominative? We will always answer yes to this question. Now you can see the FibroScan giving us a progress in terms of as it creates these FIBX files and places them on the USB stick, it's alerting me to where it is in that process. It will finish up now in just a couple of seconds, and it will have placed, in this case, 8 FibX or FIBX files on the USB stick. Notice it's telling me that it has completed that process. So if I were to go look at that USB stick using Explorer on any computer, I would see that there are 8 FibX files on that USB stick now. The last step in terms of exporting is going to be to create that summary Excel file that has the information from all 8 of the subjects that we just used. So to do this, I merely click the .xls button, which of course means Excel file. And now that I've clicked that, the first question it's going to ask me, once again, is, do you want the data to be nominative? I will say yes. And again, it's telling me when the process is over. You'll notice creation of that Excel file and putting it on the USB stick, which was a much faster process than the FibX files because it's a much shorter duration process. Now, let's move on. In our next step, we need to rename our files. Before we can begin the renaming process, we need to go to the computer that we want to use for all the data management. So at this point, we're no longer working on the FibroScan. We're working on some PC that you've designated for this study to do file management with. And this needs to be a PC that has access to the internet because later on we're going to be exporting some files to the EchoNet platform in the cloud. So you need to go to that PC, and on the desktop, we want you to create a folder system, which you see on the PowerPoint slide. So what you will do is you will use the create folder function on your PC, and you would create a folder for the trial ID. Now, the name of that folder wouldn't actually be trial ID. It would be the trial ID of whatever study we're working with here. Imagine that, for example, it was study XYZ. For example, if you look on my desktop, you'll see that I've created a folder on the desktop called Study XYZ. I'm going to open up that folder so that you can see what I've done underneath it. Now, inside that, we're going to create 3 subfolders. We're going to create a folder that we're going to call Exported Files. We're going to create another new folder we're going to call Renamed Files. And finally, we're going to create a 3rd subfolder called Anonymized Files. Again, all of this is done on your PC. We're no longer using a FibroScan for this step. Now we will insert our USB stick with all of the files that we generated in the prior step. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy all of these files, or export them if you prefer the term, and we're going to put them inside these folders. So we would first take, in my example, all of the FibX files that we just created, plus the one summary Excel file that we created, and we would paste it inside the folder called Exported Files. Second step, we would do exactly the same thing again. We would copy all of our files from the USB stick, and we would paste them into the folder called Renamed Files. The Renamed File folder is the one we're going to work with. The Exported File folder is there just for protection. In case we make a mistake, we always have a way to go back to our original files. Now, in the next step, we're going to go to that Renamed File folder, and I'm going to do that on my computer so that you can see what I'm doing on the right-hand side. And you'll notice when I clicked the Renamed Files folder, here you can see a series of FibX files that I've placed in that folder. Please also notice that you have an Excel summary file in here. So in this case, I have 4 FibX files, 4 separate studies, and I have 1 summary spreadsheet. So the first thing that we're going to do to start our renaming of the FibX files process is I'm going to double click on the Excel file to open it up. I need the Excel file so that I can correlate what I'm seeing in the Excel file, and I can get the files renamed with the subject ID. Let's take a look at the Excel file on the right. I want you to notice I am highlighting the first FibX file, which again has that very long file name that includes the serial number of the FibroScan, the date and time that the study was done. If you look just to the right of that at the last name field, you will see the actual last name of this subject. And of course, it's not actually their name, it's their subject ID. This came from when you initiated the study on the FibroScan. So for example, in this case, we know the file that ends in 150633 is subject ID 12345. To revise the file name to include the subject ID, I'm going to go to that specific study, and I've clicked on the FibX file, and what I'm going to do is just to the left of the .fibx, I'm going to put in an underscore, and then I'm going to put in ID 12345, which is the subject ID for this particular subject. Now you will notice that the file name has been changed to include the subject ID. This will allow us, after anonymization, to know what file we're looking at. This process would be completed for each respective FibX file using the Excel file as our guide as to what the subject ID is that should be inserted on the various file names. Now we're ready to go to the next step. Now that we have the renamed FIBX files inside the rename folder, we will move to the last step, which is to anonymize these FIBX files. This is a very important step because these files contain protected healthcare information, or PHI, and we need to be sure that we remove all of those identifiers before these files are shared for scientific purposes. This is the purpose of the FibX file anonymizer software that you were provided by your Echosens representative. So to perform this step, you would open up the FibX file anonymizer software, and you would double click on line 1 to perform that function, and then you would move your way down the buttons. So once the software is launched, you would click the icon for Choose Source FIBX Folder. Once you have clicked that, you would enter the file path for your folder called Renamed Files, because that's where your FibX files currently reside. And then you would click Next. Now you will be on the Choose Destination folder icon. Once you click on that, you would set that file path to anonymized files. Remember, that's one of the folders you created on your desktop. You would click Next once you have done that, and then the final step would be to click the Anonymize button, and then all of the FibX files that are present in the renamed file folder would be completely anonymized and placed in the anonymized file folder. We will be able to access those files in the next step. These are the files that need to be shared for scientific purposes. So our final step is to upload those files that we just created that are the anonymized files. Now you would use your computer to connect to the Echosens EchoNet platform. And here is the launch icon that you would click to access that platform. And at this point, it will ask you for your password and login information. If you haven't been supplied a password and login, please email clinical@echosens.com and they will assign you the passcode and login. You will double click once you've logged in to get the existing site folder. Again, your site folder should already be there. If it isn't there, you can create your own folder. Once you have identified your folder, then you will merely click the icon that you see here on the right, Add Files. At this point, you will then click Classic Transfer, and all of your anonymized FIBX files will be uploaded to the EchoNet site for scientific access. This concludes all of the file management instructions. We've talked a little bit about what an FIBX file is, how it is that you need to manage this to back up your files on a regular basis, anonymize your files, and upload them to the EchoNet platform. If you have any questions about any of these steps, please feel free to email clinical@echosens.com, and we will be happy to assist you further. Thank you for attention, and good day.